All right, good evening. Welcome to the Public Safety Building Committee meeting for Monday, January 14th. All members are present except for Ms. Cook, who I expect, and I know Mr. Moorhead will not be joining us tonight. First action item is approval of meeting minutes from December 3rd of 2018. Seems like years ago, but it was our last meeting. Any comments, questions on the draft that was circulated from Mr. Lyons?
My only comment is, as always, John, the minutes were spot on. Thank you so much for doing such a great job on these.
Any other comments, questions, edits? All right, then I'll move that we accept the minutes as drafted by Mr. Lyons. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? I see one abstention. Mr. Rooney abstained. Chairman's update. Monthly project-related updates. I have a few updates that I'll provide this evening. So first,
Sorry, we're just sliding a microphone hook down, but Kathy can fit it here.
little musical chairs.
Sorry, empty spot.
So under Chairman's update, first.
You missed that.
Yeah. All right. So first, we'll try this again. So first item is on December 31st, I did a walking tour of the site with Mr. Purple, Mr. Ballantyne, and it was accompanied by Bill from Vertex. It's amazing to see the progress going on inside the facility now. I think you can all see it from 85, but we're actually able to access the second floor. I will say the police chief's office looks pretty good. You're actually able to see kind of where every office is situated and how the building's really coming together. So what we are going to do is once the stairs are in to fully access the second floor to minimize any potential risk, we will set up a tour for the committee to walk through. I think you'll find it enlightening. You'll actually kind of see what the building looks like and try to remember which space was which. I didn't have actually a floor plan with me when I walked through the site, but there was a lot of work. And like I said, I was there on New Year's Eve, and to see actually the number of people working on New Year's Eve, I was warned, oh, it's going to be a pretty light day. There was at least 20 to 30 people there, so if you think about what was actually happening on a regular basis. So all good things. I think you can see it just every day it continues to get more enclosed, and we continue to probably minimize ourselves from the impact of winter, but I'll let these gentlemen walk through that in further detail. The other item is, I think everyone is following the town budget situation. And more than ever before, I've gotten questions, probably more questions this week than I got actually during the entire study committee period about the project. Some numbers that were in the selectmen's presentation from the other night. In terms of how it impacts the tax rate this year and in the forthcoming years, and how that then ties back to what was presented at the special town meeting. To me, they're off, but I have asked Mr. Purple and Mr. Ballantyne to kind of prepare an analysis to kind of allow us to educate others on where the costs are coming. Remember, this project is obviously under budget at this point in time, so the amount that we anticipated the project costing is not going to be the total amount. So when you start piecing the things together, they should come up to some number less than what was presented at the town meeting a couple years ago. So there's a lot of apples and oranges in terms of how you read any one presentation, and I respect that. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that I'm personally looking into it. I imagine advisory committee members that are sitting up here are probably very focused on it. But I think, you know, in short, wanted to use the opportunity to remind the public that this project, while approved for $22.6 million, has been incredibly well run by a number of parties that, you know, we're not going to come anywhere close to spending that amount on this building at this point, and especially given how far along we are in the process. And I think that message probably is going to be fully lost in the grand scheme of things, right, when you start looking at the overall operating picture of the town. But I did want to make this committee aware that I'm definitely focused on making sure that the numbers that are presented to other parties that relate to this project still all tie into everything that has come out of this committee to date. So I wish I had more detail tonight, and I did, you know, want to make sure that it's precise and all things are speaking to each other going down the road, given that this project hasn't been fully bonded yet. So we're only seeing kind of the beginning impact of it in our tax bills. We're not seeing the full, let's just say we were spending 22.6 million. We're not seeing the full impact of that in the project to date in our tax bills. So I guess I'll pause there and see if there's just any general reaction to that. Okay.
Can I react for a moment?
Yeah.
And there's more to come,
Yeah.
so just briefly. I am concerned that the overall budget problem, that the success of this committee and this building will get kind of sucked up into that. So I do hope that we're able to separate the two at the town meeting, because it is something to truly applaud, whatever. But this is what there's 3 or 4 things that have caused what we've got, and it may turn out to be a 5-year problem that we can get through. You may remember when you guys did your presentation in March of 16 at the special, where everything was approved. Advisory got up in front of the town and said, we definitely can afford this. This is not going to have a abnormal impact on your taxes. We'd done a study where we had asked all the other departments what they wanted to build in the next 20, 30 years, so that we could say that this was not going to cannibalize those plans, and we concluded it wasn't. We looked at a new library, we looked at this building, we looked at a new community building. We looked at $40 million worth of new buildings. This is only, Brian, it's $24 million, I think, is what we're going to end up borrowing when everything is said and done with this building, including the land. And so we're well under the 40, so what's wrong? Well, for one thing, we did use a much lower number for this building, so the other 2 buildings were pushed out in the future, so that's number 1, so that's part of it. Number 2, I don't think, if there was a flaw in the model, this is one of the flaws, we didn't expect the reimbursement from the state for the schools to dip like it did this coming year, and that's a big problem this coming year, is that dip. It's $1.3 million or so. And then the other revenue, so of a $55 million budget, about 10 of it comes from other sources besides real estate taxes. That's just fallen off a cliff. So they predict that to be 0. So if it's 0, then that means real estate taxes are going to absorb the whole budget increase. So there's several things that are causing this. So as Brian Ballantyne will tell you, I think it's a perfect storm. So we're going to do our best to try to explain it, and Advisory is going to work really hard the next 2 months to try to come up with a solution for the next 4 or 5 years, so we really can get through this. Right now, they're predicting a 13% real estate tax increase next year. So we can't have that, obviously. So it is a problem. And this very well may get lost in that, at least in the short run, but I hope not. I hope we really can separate the message, because what you guys did with the original committee and with this is certainly something to be recognized and cheered.
Okay. So I think we'll continue to keep the committee updated on that. The other item I have under Chairman's update is change order responsibility. I brought this up at the last meeting, that I had started to have some preliminary conversations with Vertex about, certain items that may have fallen through the cracks at various stages of the process, and making sure that the town wasn't ending up on the hook for a higher bill than if they had been caught sooner in the process. I did have a follow-up conversation with Kevin and Bill in the last couple of weeks, and where we've landed is we're going to punt this discussion a couple months down the road and kind of take a more holistic view. I think once we get to the change orders tonight, you're going to see that there are some change orders on here tonight that are what I would term as optional, and then there are some items on here that we're not going to have much of a choice. But we thought we would get a little further in the process to then be able to take a holistic view and say, all right, this thing is acceptable, this is not, and really kind of encapsulate it into one discussion, as opposed to kind of taking it as a series of discussions as we went on. We're going to be watching kind of how the invoices are going out, and making sure that we're holding back enough if we think there's an issue with any vendor along the way, so that we're not like paying a bill and then asking for something back, so to say. So I anticipate probably March at the very earliest, but probably April or May, we would start to have this discussion and have Vertex bring forward a proposal of how we would address some of these items along the way. So, any questions on that? All right. Move into item 4, owner's project manager, monthly project update. Kevin?
Yes, so in your packet tonight, you'll see that you have the update, the monthly report for December. I don't know if you want to lower the screen and we can go over some photographs. Make sure it coincides with what we're talking about. So I plug this in, and I apologize, this is my first time doing this. Okay, there it is, yep.
You can give us a general update if you want.
All
while
right,
it
so,
warms
so
up.
right now, things are moving along on the project. Obviously, like Jason had said, we're almost finished now with the den glass around the building. We're continuing with site work. The tight tank came, delivered the other day. They dug out and excavated for it last week. We're heavily into right now shrouding the building in protective plastic. So the heat on the inside of the building has already started. So that's already being heated right now as you speak. So as you look at the photograph right here, one of the first ones, you can see the Dens glass being installed. This is on the side of the PD, okay, on the towards the Woodward School, all right? And obviously, that photograph was taken several days ago because now if you were there today, the entire side is completely plasticed in. And they're already starting their roof work right now. So that was a good start onto that project side right there. And obviously, again, a shot from the front, which again, at the behind the lift right there in front of you is completely now covered in. So the heater's on the right side of that photograph, heating the interior of the building, and the Dens glass and the wood framing is all done on the outside. Site work continues to go on inside, while they're doing excavations for trenching. And in this photograph right here, you can see where they're boxing out the columns for future concrete installation. On average, they're having over 20 people on site. They've been working around the clock, not around the clock, but working 5 days a week. And the unfortunate part is the forecast for this weekend is for our first significant snow. So any site work that's not done, they'll have to be catching up and plowing away to keep going. Good update now is that the windows are all in, and you can see the window openings here, and they started to plastic those all in. They're continuing to do that on a regular basis, just to get the building completely filled in. Here it is on the back side of the building, going over towards where you can see the Dens glass being installed. Front side of the building, you can see that's the lobby area. The rear side, looking back towards the training tower, site work is being done and around, and a septic tank installed right in front of you, right over there. The clubhouse also, just for information, has been provided with a temporary certificate of occupancy. Here's the interior of the apparatus bays being excavated and leveled out. Again, a picture looking at the septic field, looking towards the golf course fairway, and right in front of it is the retention pond that's being dug out. It's big enough to hold a NHL-sized hockey game if you guys ever wanted to flood it and freeze it, so, or hide somebody. Also, interior metal stud installation going on throughout the building on the second floor, and they'll be working their way down. And now that's what's so important, significant about doing the temporary heat and heating the space, because now as the weather starts to turn on us, we'll be able to get more work done interiorly, all right? There's some office space and some layouts. You can see the painting on the floor where they're gonna show walls and office space areas being done. And then, to wrap it up, here is some more where the interior studs are being laid out, the floors are being laid out, as well as you can see the wooden roof trusses installed and the Dens glass going all around the exterior of the building. and the AVB and the roof sheathing is all installed on the second, up on the roof. And here we are continuing with site work. This is the trench for the electrical, going down towards where the new poles are gonna be installed, and now provide power to the building and the training tower in the background. Well, right now, we're having him dig it out. We don't have an exact date as to when the pole's gonna go in, but this trench will all be taken care of they'll be 20 feet away, give or take. So when the day comes that National Grid does come with the new poles, we'll be able to hook up right away. They don't give you a date certain? It's one of those, if things are really slow, I'll get to you really fast. If things are busy, I'll get to you when I can get to you. So right now, we're on the docket, we're on the calendar, they know that we're ready to go and that we're excavating. We've had numerous meetings with them out in the field to pinpoint the exact location of the poles. So right now, everything is going according to plan.
No concern about a delay from them?
No, the only thing, I mean, they settled their lawsuit, the only thing would be something other catastrophic comes up or unforeseen, then we might be in a problem. But we'll let everybody well aware of that before that would hit us. But those are the pictures from the site. So, all right. Are there any other questions with regards to the monthly report?
All right. We will move on to item 5, proposed change orders. So in your packet is a letter from Context outlining the various items. Like in prior months, we'll skip over any golf-related items that are outside of the charge of the committee. I'm also going to hold the epoxy floors until the end and kind of deal with that one separately. But I guess, Jeff, I'm going to skip PCO 10R1 and 19R3 relating to the clubhouse and start right with PCO 34R2 shower revisions for $28,695.14.
Okay, so this revision to the contract includes the provision of new shower enclosures for all the 7 showers in the building. The design intent was to have pre-made fiberglass shower units. That's what the architectural drawings show, but unfortunately the plumbing drawings only showed what they expected it to be a custom tile shower and specified a terrazzo shower base. So the plumber, who is providing the shower units, only referred to the plumbing drawings. That's one of the curiosities of the way the state runs the public bidding requirements, so you have to very carefully identify what trades are responsible for what pieces of scope. So even though the architectural drawings did show the shower closures, they can go by the plumbing drawings, only showing the bases. So technically, the bid for the plumbing scope didn't own shower units. So this is for the provision of these shower units with the credit of the shower bases included. So basically a swap out. And that's basically where it stands at this point. I think it's just the units itself, correct, Ellen? Correct. So it's no labor.
Any questions? Start with David.
The plumber doesn't own it because it wasn't on those drawings, but the general contractor owns it, doesn't he, because it was on the architectural drawings?
No, he's entitled to rely upon the plumbing contractor's bid. He doesn't have to include plumbing scope in his bid per se. His portion of his bid includes the plumber's bid and his separate bid for his scope.
And so any language in the contract that says if it's depicted or intended in any set of drawings, doesn't count.
Technically, that's the way the AG's office would rule on it, yeah. When you're dealing with filed subbidders.
John?
It's kind of an annoying, and just as annoyed as you are, we tried that tactic and didn't get very far in the negotiation of this.
So the plumbing drawings didn't show it.
The plumbing drawings showed showers, but they had a shower base specified, not a shower.
But the architectural drawings did.
The architectural drawings
Who drew the
depicted
plumbing
it,
drawings?
and our engineer.
Which is same as the architect then.
Well, the drawing, well, yeah, I mean, they're part of the design team, but the
So
bidder.
shouldn't they have known, hey, this is what we're putting in?
Oh, yeah, no, there's no question about it.
So you own it.
Well, I'd love to buy a shower for you, but I don't really have that.
No, 7 of them.
Technically, you didn't never bought it in the first place. That's what I was trying to say at the beginning. Your bid didn't include these showers. These are additional components. So we're only paying the actual cost of the materials to go from one unit to the unit that we intended. So put it a different way, if we had, in fact, shown the shower units on the specifications, the plumber would have included that scope in his bid, and this would be the added cost that the bid would have included.
What was the other thing in the past that we didn't put in the bids that we wound up having to buy afterwards, that we didn't pay for it in the beginning, but we needed it, but it was, we had like $100,000 oops that we
Station
talked
alerting.
about before.
Station alerting.
Was that one?
Station alerting.
Yeah,
Station alerting system.
okay.
So Jeff, let me just repeat what you just said, just to make sure everyone's, your argument is that if these had been included in the drawings, the plumbing contractor would have come in $28,000 higher on a filed sub-bid.
That's right.
Okay, but we don't really know how they would have bid, because they could have bid
Somebody
22,
could've billed
because they could have
$1.
gotten it from a
Yeah.
supply house differently to try to win the bid. Are we paying a 12% markup on these?
There is a markup on this, just like every other change order, which would be, a portion of that would be added costs, because portions of the markup are actual costs for their overhead, and
Right.
they would have included that in their bid. But, yeah, you're right, it's never clear exactly what we would have paid at bid date versus what we are paying now, but I think we're paying the least amount of money we could pay for this additional scope that was not in the drawings.
So if we went out and bought whatever shower units you're proposing at a supply house, do we know how much that would be if you just went out and this wasn't part of a filed sub-bid?
We know exactly what the cost of the product is. That's part of this PCO. It's actually in the backup. The actual cost
So we don't
for
give
the-
everyone the
for the materials.
250 pages of
Yeah, we know
drawings.
the cost for the materials themselves, and then the subcontractor and GC have added their markup. So if the town went, procured it themselves, and gave it to the contractor, you just wouldn't pay the markups, but you'd pay a majority of the cost for the actual components.
So should we be doing that, though?
Well, unfortunately, for the town to go out and publicly procure items, it's a long and messy process. to
Showers are
do
not
it.
on a state bid list?
It's not on the best state bid list, so you're obviously gonna be subject to specification and then the whole process, so, not recommended.
So Ellen, I don't know if you have the materials amount handy?
So it's $2,800 for 5 of the showers, and then there are 2.
You need a
Seen a
microphone.
mic.
5 of the showers are typical showers, and they're $2,800 apiece. And 2 of the showers are ADA accessible, and those are a little bit more, they're closer to $3,500. And then we have 2 shower controls that are $875 apiece. I'm rounding off,
That's fine. So it's approximately $23,000.
yes.
And then the rest of that would be markup, is what you're saying?
Well, and then we have a credit, so we have a credit for 7 bases. The bases are worth $133 apiece. And then we have a credit for the incorrect controls, so those were $275 apiece, about. So,
We'll shave 1,000 off, roughly. A little- it's a little
1,500.
higher, Yeah.
you shave $1,500 in credits. And then there's overhead and profit of 15% and bond of 2%, so that adds up to 3,600. Yeah, well, I was just adding up this little piece here, but the total is 25.
So John, I think you have said, the way I think about it is, what would it cost if it had been in there in the first place, and then what's the added? That comes back to kind of the change order responsibility piece that I talked about in the chairman's update. That would be something I would kind of make a note of.
So that's on the list.
Can be.
Okay.
Was this designed for tile?
So the intention from the beginning was prefabricated fiberglass shower.
It was?
Units.
So
Always
my
from the
thought was,
beginning.
if you get a terrazzo base, generally you'd have tile.
Yeah,
and
that's
then The
exactly,
plumber wouldn't put in tile.
that's correct. Yep.
So
So there's a,
if somebody was supposed to put in tile, would that be cheaper?
no, we looked at that as an option, but that would be as expensive, if not more expensive, to
Because of the labor
because
involved.
of the labeler. We don't own the labor. We own the labor to install a shower, even though technically it's a base. not
Did-
much more in labor to
did
install
we-
the unit.
Did we bid for tile? Like,
We have tile in the
is there a
project.
contractor that plans on putting tile in there?
Correct.
Is my
There's a
question.
tile setter in the project, and it was gonna be working in these bathrooms, but they don't, not included in their bid to do a whole
They
shower.
didn't plan on bidding to put tile the showers? That wasn't part of their,
No, we didn't specify it, because we, again, that would be under the architectural specifications, and that whole
I was just wondering if it
spec
was on
set
there.
up for-
I mean, it wouldn't be on the plumber's specs because the plumber doesn't do that. I was wondering
That's right.
if it is on somebody else's, meaning whoever puts in tile,
No,
we could hit them up.
it's a pretty simple, issue. It's a simple issue where the plumbing drawings were incorrect, and they should have owned a prefabricated shower base, and they didn't. Everything else was set up correctly. It was that one piece.
The plumbing drawings, they were incorrect. With what they drew, is that a viable way to do the showers? I mean, you're talking about like 7 open showers, that's what he,
Yeah, if the plumbing drawings were correct and everything else was wrong, then the architectural drawings should have shown tile, waterproofing, elevations showing the tile enclosure all being custom tile, and then the detail showing how it integrates with the shower pan. Then the plumbing drawings would have been correct, and the architectural specs and drawings would have been wrong, but that wasn't the case. That would be more money to go that route. And also, it's more operational issues, because you have to clean the grout, and it's just more of a hassle. We
Okay,
found
so
that fiberglass
I'm
is
still not
better.
quite clear. So if the plumbing drawings had been correct, right? They had carried out the architect's specifications, right?
Yep.
With what he did. Is that a viable way to do showers? And if not, why wouldn't the plumber have understood that from the very get-go? Even if he had drawings, why wouldn't he have said, there's something wrong here?
Well, I'm sure a bidder, if they were so inclined, a plumbing bidder, if they were so inclined, looking at the architecturals, would have seen the discrepancy. But you're in a bidding situation, and they may not have chosen to ask the question. We did look to see if anybody had asked the question and whether it was straightened out in an addendum, which it wasn't. And they may have seen an opportunity. It's as simple as that. Or more than likely, nobody even checked the architectural drawings. They just assumed the plumbing, this is the scope, the plumbing drawings show, I'm gonna bid the scope, and we'll get into the details when we get into construction. So, while this isn't private construction, I guess, is a better way to put it. Public construction, you're just looking clearly at only what you own and not trying to do any sort of coordination or any thinking outside of that scope. And if we were in a private construction, then yeah, I think we would have had a conversation with contractors ahead of time and said, well, clearly, it's shown in the architecturals is different from the plumbing. Why wouldn't you have assumed there's an issue here? At least one of the two has to be right. And your bid should have included a fully operational shower area. And which way did you choose to do it? Did you go to the prefab route, or did you go the custom tile route? And we'll pick one of the two, and the bid should have included that, but that's not what public construction does.
Any other questions on this one? All right, next one is PCO 46, training tower revisions, which is a credit of $1,220.07.
So this had to do with a decision to change the way the training tower works, which is a little bit of a more rough and tumble part of the building. We did have to spend some money to make this change, but it was offset by a bunch of things we didn't need. So it's basically a design change during construction when we realized that the way it was designed probably wasn't as correct as we wanted it to be. So we ended up with a net credit for the revisions.
Any questions on that one? PCO 59, cornice revision, $16,658.22.
So this change order has to do with the roof at the apparatus bay, as well as the flat roof in the back of the building, around the detention area. And the design called for a very highly efficient, energy efficient insulation thickness. So code requires a minimum average insulation of 6 inches. We specified a minimum of 6 inches, and then any tapered insulation above that to make the roof work with rainwater runoff. our detail, unfortunately, was based upon the average, 6-inch average. So the detail at the edge of the roof, where the roof terminated and we have a cornice line, was based upon that 6-inch average. The roofer picked that up in the shop drawing phase and said, you know, this is the way we expect to do it, is with the average insulation rather than the minimum insulation. And we said, no, we'd like to have the more energy efficient design, and they were okay with providing that, except that it now required us to make our cornice taller by a certain amount of inches to cover the insulation buildup. So we had a choice. We could have said, fine, we'll just downgrade the design and not spend any extra money, but this decision was to make the cornices taller so we can get that insulation thickness, which is what the modeling and the energy modeling of the building was based upon. So there is tapered insulation. It's on top of the 6-inch minimum thickness rigid insulation. So it's just higher, essentially. Tapered insulation would be necessary to pitch the water to the internal roof drains.
So what, I'm sorry, I guess I'm confused. So what happened? We originally had a plan to go with the tapered in the drawings, and then they said that, but they had based it on the thinner, the standard?
So it's a little confusing. So code requires an average insulation of 6 inches, roughly. It's actually an R value, but it's an average of 6 inches of rigid insulation, which includes the minimum and the maximum pitch of the tapered insulation. It can be higher, can be lower than that 6 inches. And that's how the roofer anticipated the building, and that's actually how our cornice was designed. But we had always specified in the specifications a minimum at the lowest thickness, minimum thickness of the roof, it's 6 inches. And then everything else to get the tapered insulation, to get the roof drainage to work correctly, is built up above that. So in some cases, we had 11 inches of insulation in the thickest portions of the roof. And that, obviously, at the edges required the cornice to be higher, because the cornice was originally designed with an average of 6, and now adding 5 or 6 inches to that means we've got to raise those cornices up. So that's where this cost comes in. It's the raising of the cornices to meet that added thickness of the insulation. I'm not sure if I explained it any better.
No.
It was kind of the same explanation.
Any other questions on that one? All right.
Metal roof edge?
Yep.
This has to do with the same item that I just discussed. This was.
Well, you skipped, what about 60, oh, that's, well, no, so 60B is clubhouse, trench, drain, and piping. I believe that's a site work issue, so I believe that is ours, unless I have that wrong, Mark. Mark? Clubhouse, trench, drain, and piping. That's clubhouse? What was the site work issue that you approved?
It was drainage,
Right.
trench drain, and it was the cart washing.
So, Jeff, you
Talk
gotta
about
walk
it.
us through that one. So it's $11,567.82.
So the design that we provided included drainage around the clubhouse. The contractor felt that the drainage wasn't sufficient to keep water from going into the garage door. So this cost is for installing a trench drain at the garage door so that to keep water from coming in. Best way to explain it is to say, because the golf clubhouse is on the side of a hill, the water comes down the hill and goes around the clubhouse, and we've designed a swale so that the water would sheet across the cart path rather than coming into the garage door and go across it. The site contractor felt that the water wouldn't do that. It would, some of it anyways, would head towards the garage door, and it would be better to have a trench drain there to pick it up. So we said, whatever, we'll look at your PCO and we'll review it, even though we think our design will work. This is essentially the suspenders approach. This also has some cost for a hose bib, external hose bib for washing carts down. So there's some plumbing included.
Can you separate that cost?
I think it should be possible to do that
So I'm not
internally.
comfortable with a golf manager deciding what this committee does, so. I'm wondering if we can separate it or
Ellen has-
approve it conditioned upon
Um,
that.
Let me see if I can bring it up.
In this area, it's also where they do wash down the golf carts. And the intent was, as the driveway comes down into the garage door, there's nothing to stop it from going, because it's at the same elevation. So the idea was to then carry it into a drain, which would then connect to an existing site pipe that would carry it off to the main retention area for the site, so.
What is next on
Did you know
It's, you hook the hose right up to it and you turn the water on,
It's an exterior faucet.
exactly.
It's a faucet.
You have them on your house, you hook your exterior hose to it, sprinkler hose or whatever, and you just turn the water on, and that's how you wash your trucks.
Doesn't seem like it ties into this PCO, but
It's a spigot, yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Right,
trying to-
well, we're there.
yeah, well, we're,
Sorry,
yeah.
it seems like I may have made a mistake here. Even though the recommendation includes this cart washing thing, I see where I sort of went off track. What was there was no cost for installing the hose bib in this. However, when you wash the carts down, the water is gonna go someplace.
Right.
And that's why, again, the trench drain was thought of as a benefit, because it keeps any wash water from also coming back inside. So
So-
that's where I went off track. So this is strictly for the trench drain, that's it.
Right, so the trench drain is going to pick up the water that's used to wash the carts, and is it also going to serve another purpose?
Yeah.
Is it also going to pick up water that's otherwise sheeting across?
Shooting across the driveway,
Yeah.
coming down
If
that
it,
path.
if it should pass into the,
Okay,
If you get a summer storm that just overloads
Sure.
the driveway, this will pick it up before it gets inside the building.
Any other questions on 60B? All right, we're gonna skip 61, so Jeff,
62.
62.
Okay, so we had because of the change I explained to you earlier about the cornice change, because the roofing is not now able to go up and over the top of the cornice, we changed the detail for the roofer, and he agrees with it. It's still gonna meet warranty, everything like that, but to keep him moving, there was a CCD issued for not to exceed $5,000 to materials and labor for the roofer to change the way his roof termination ended. So some metal and some termination bars and things like that were needed so that he could end his roof membrane a certain way. It ended up being an actual cost of $3,314.45. So essentially, the CCD already approved the work. The work's been done. This is just a record of what happened.
Okay. Any questions on that one? So, what I'm gonna do now, unless anyone wants me to hold any specific one, I was gonna move those items that we just discussed for approval, and then we'll come back to the epoxy floor. Anyone wanna hold any of them for a different vote?
60B,
Okay. Anything else anyone wants to hold? All right, so then I am going to move PCO 34R2 shower revisions, PCO 46 training tower revisions, PCO 49 cornice revisions, and PCO 62 metal roof edge. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving those change orders? Any opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. Now let's go back to 60B. So Kathy, before I think anyone moves anything on this one, thoughts, comments, consideration?
so I go back what Jeff just said, which is he thinks the way they had designed it was fine, that this is belt and suspenders. If we didn't do this now, can you do it later if something really if it didn't work and they really needed to dig the trench, would it cost $11,000 to do it later?
That's a good question. Well, I would say it would be more challenging for the town to do it later, because it'd be golfers trying to play unless you're doing the off-season. It could be done later. I think the cost is It's possible that you could do it for this cost or less than this cost.
I think you'd have a remobilization, which is gonna increase your cost.
It depends
you
on
would
who
have to
you,
leave,
it depends
yeah.
on who
I
you
think
use,
Kathy's
too,
talking
because
about
it's also-
not,
If you don't, if you
CTK,
don't use him
right?
at all,
You're talking about
then you're just
someone
bringing
else.
somebody
Yeah,
else
so
in.
3 years,
This
you say,
is
okay, this
exactly
really-
down
we
the
are
road.
seeing the cost.
This is a smaller contractor, I'm thinking, and might be able to do it at a,
But would you have to reseed and the
yeah,
area?
there would be remediation work definitely required.
Because
Some of
what-
that could be part of this maintenance of the golf course. I mean, 12,000 is a lot of dollars.
You can get French in your house for like 5 million.
Right, that's the other part is,
Yeah,
we have a
tear up
paved
the
area
paved
behind
area.
the golf. If, what used to be the front, which is now the back.
Yeah.
The idea is to eventually put a patio back there, and
Right.
the drain would go through there now. You'd have to dig that all up in order to
Patio.
put that
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'd forgotten about the patio, so that if you include the cost of redoing the patio, then it would definitely be at least the 12, if not
Now, I
more.
wouldn't be questions, but you said you don't think that, I'm paraphrasing this, that we don't need this. You think that your design is adequate to.
I think the design will keep the sheet flow from coming inside the building. If they're washing carts close to the building on that slope, I think all bets are off at that point. I mean, I don't know where exactly they're gonna wash the carts. They're gonna probably wash them as close as they can to the building, frankly. That's my guess. But if that's the plan, then yeah, trench drain would probably be a good idea to keep that water from constantly coming in the building. But if they find someplace else to wash the carts that's further away,
So we
hard
don't
to
know
tell.
where they're gonna wash the cart, so it's a
we
question.
have, I think, an idea where the current operator intends to do what he thinks is gonna happen, but they haven't started working at all at this location and operation, so it's quite possible things will change over time. What he thinks now may be different in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, but washing the carts, we're not talking about a fire hose, we're talking about a garden hose,
That's right.
spraying it down
Yep.
on
Yep.
individual carts. And I
Yep.
don't assume the volume is all that significant.
No, and it's just a matter of which direction they're spraying the water. That's kind of where I'm worried about, is that the farther you go away from the actual door, the more chance the water's not going into the
Right.
door, because the path is sort of sloped away from the door sideways, which is encouraging the water to go around, but
So if the club manager is cognizant of that and could wash the carts at a certain distance where the water's not gonna sheet into the building, it would solve this issue.
that particular item, I don't think would be as big a deal. But again, if they're gonna be doing any other work around the building with drainage, getting the thing to go under the patio. If it at all ever would be an issue or could be an issue, doing the work now probably is the best solution. So I think our design probably would work, but I can't predict how he's
Sure.
gonna use the property, and it may not work
Do
in the
you think
future.
your design is sufficient to stop the sheeting of water coming down the hill? Forget about the washing of the golf course. You
Yeah.
designed it for that purpose, correct?
That's right. Yep.
And you're confident or you're comfortable that that purpose will be addressed by the existing design?
That's right.
It's just the additional cart washing which may cause water to go into the basement.
Yep.
One solution to that would perhaps do the cart washing at a distance where the water would not sheet into the basement.
Yeah, I would say wherever he's gonna wash it, it could be done in a different location. My guess is that human nature being what it is, that's probably where they're gonna do it, because that's where the garden hose is, and that's where the carts go, so.
That's where the asphalt is. We have no other piece of asphalt in that area that he could pull the carts off to the side and
No.
clean them. Everything else would be dirt and grass.
Yeah.
Okay,
So once you
Currently.
start washing, now you're gonna have mud.
okay.
Eventually, it'll all be landscaped and everything else, but again,
Mark, is this an item that you've already tentatively approved as part of the first phase of it, as part of your authorization you have? I'm just trying to, I know there was a site work item related to drainage. Is this the same item?
Yes.
So has work already begun on this?
right now, no.
Okay,
Nope, their focus right now is the firehouse and police station.
okay.
But this has to be done as part of turning over the clubhouse.
So, discussion amongst the committee of how you want to move on this one?
Well, I'm concerned about water in the clubhouse, only because the town has got a history of water in basements and buildings, and the concerns associated with that. And if the subsequent remediation is gonna require the digging up of a patio, that's gonna certainly exceed the $12,000 that we're talking about here. So in this case, I'm not sure I even see it as a belt and suspenders. If there's nowhere else to wash the carts other than in this asphalt area, and that asphalt area is gonna cause the water to sheet down towards the building, to me, that's not a belt and suspenders. That is a condition that, you know what, we need to acknowledge, and I'd be in favor of approving it for that reason.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
How
And I,
much water are you thinking they're gonna be using though? Like you said, it's not a fire
Well,
hose. It's garden
I'm,
hose.
They didn't
It
tell
does-
you they're using the deck gun to wash
Yeah.
carts?
I mean, it's a garden hose. I don't think it's gonna cause that much sheeting of water. You're talking a few
I mean,
2 gallons of rinse. It's not like they're gonna leave the water running, at least I hope they're
No.
not.
maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I think the golf cart thing is a distraction. I'm hearing hill and anyone that's walked up there, but I know Jeff is saying, right, I'm confused, right, I'm more worried about water off the hillside. Jeff is standing by his design, right, but that's where my concern is, that water may go into the basement. I'm not concerned about the golf carts, so.
That was my original concern, was the, you know, the water coming down the hill, but what he says his design is adequate to stop the sheeting from the runoff. They're more concerned with the wash water. I don't see the wash water being all that much water.
it depends which teenager is washing the carts and how he's doing it and how long he leaves the hose on. But also, I'm sure you're confident in your design, as am I. But things don't always work as they're designed. And if you get a good summer storm, there may be more sheeting than would be contemplated. So I guess if that's kind of a stop, kind of a bulwark against any water that comes down there.
That's why I said in the initial statement that I felt it was an extra measure. You know, I get the fact that the carts could be washed there, and that potential is potentially greater than, depending on how much water they use and how many times a year they do it, every day, you know. That could be more water than ever comes down out of the sky, I don't know.
Right.
But
Or the ground doesn't absorb it, or whatever.
What's in the basement of the clubhouse? Is it
carts,
so it's gonna be the slab and then?
there's mechanical equipment in the back,
There's a hot water heater.
hot water heater, but the most of it is carts. Yeah, the stair comes down to the lowest level, there's a drywall wall.
So let's say
down
we had
there.
a devastating
You know,
storm
if you've got inches of water in there, you might have some drywall issues.
What about the water heater? Is it elevated?
I'd have to look at that, I don't recall.
If you got more than an inch or so, if you got enough, like 4 inches or something like that, then you're getting into issues with the maintenance of the equipment, the water heater that's in there. That would be a concern.
All right.
But that's a lot of water, 4
Yeah.
inches.
Are there any other questions? All right, so then, for purposes of a vote, I'm gonna move that we accept change order 60B clubhouse trench draining and piping. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? That motion carries, 5-3. All right, epoxy floors, PCO 61, $90,469.16. Before I turn to Jeff, let me just remind everyone of the history on this, because I think it's incredibly important as to where you go. First and foremost, I do not plan to call a vote on this unless someone else makes a motion tonight, and I'll explain my rationale for that now. I asked our consultants here to bring it forward now so that all of you could do the appropriate research and also candidly watch the town budget situation before, like, see what transpires over the next month before making a decision. We will have to make a go, no-go decision because of the lead time and making sure it gets properly scheduled to not impact opening date of the building, probably next month. So I would consider this informational tonight unless someone feels so swayed that they really want to move a $90,000 item, considering how that last vote went. I don't see that happening, but there's other members of the committee. When we originally designed the building, right, there was a design budget that came to us in the November of 2017. November 2017. We were like $1.5 million over what we thought the building was going to cost. Right, we scrambled. We cut the fire canopies out, we cut the police canopies down, took a lot of other things out. One of the things we took out was epoxy flooring. In hindsight, I think at least in talking to the Vertex team, it should have been included as an add alternative into the bid pricing. It was not. I get Kevin wasn't at the table in that discussion, but he said if he was here, he would have advised us to have it as an add alternative. The complication with that, as we all know, the golf course items, we had to pick, you had to go in order, and if you said no to any single one, you can't go below that item. My understanding is in building committee meetings that happen weekly, this item came back up as something that, at least I think the Vertex team was saying, they're seeing done in most stations. There's a benefit to it from a maintenance perspective. I'll let them articulate that further. So I asked them, I said, we can always bring it forward, but, given that this is a VE item from the past and is optional as opposed to, required, i.e. we needed a shower in the building, I didn't know how the committee would fare. So I guess I'll just open up to Kevin and Jeff. If you want to expand on anything I said or discuss any further rationale of why you think this may be beneficial, why we should think about it, given the price tag.
Let me
Sure.
maybe explain what it is, first of all. So this is a epoxy flooring system designed for garage space that has heavy apparatus on it. It's a mixture of different chemicals, for lack of a better term, including epoxies and concrete cementitious type products that will go down. Has a vapor barrier as part of the product, so it's pretty good durable finish for our apparatus space. We've seen it go down in a lot of different stations. Kevin has too. We've seen it go down in different time periods, right sort of in the normal course of building the project or right at the end, where somebody's made a decision at the very end to put it in. There's maintenance that does come with it because it's a topical system applied to the concrete. There'll be control joints that have sealant in them that over time eventually may need to be reapplied. There'll be a flexible sealant, but over time, we're talking tens of years, that sealant may dry out, may harden, and may have to get pulled out and replaced. There's also the possibility concrete cracks. It's just the nature of the product, so there's a possibility that this might crack in a spot we don't have a control joint where the sealant in it, in which case they might need to come back out and cut a new joint in and put sealant in that. And there's also the possibility that equipment, tools, trucks with hot tires turning on them could damage the floor, and the floor would have to be repaired in the future, or it just doesn't get repaired and it slowly deteriorates. So like anything in a project, it's a maintenance item, it's a wear item, and eventually it'll wear out. But it's a pretty durable product, and if you're gonna put an epoxy floor in a fire station, this is usually what we recommend. And we do fire stations without it, we do them with it, but more so these days, people are wanting to put them in. So this floor is gray right now, it's all gray with yellow backup stripes on each side of each bay, so that from both sides of the building, if they're backing vehicles into it, they have a line on the floor that tells them where to hit the truck. So that's embedded into the epoxy system, so it's part of the pricing for this two-color system. If we were to do it on the concrete, there would just be line painting on the concrete, which would wear.
No, like Jeff had said, we had previously done it at several fire stations where the intent was for the durability of the floor. In some firehouses we've done, like in Chelmsford, they did not do it, and it was a finance issue. The way that we're talking about it tonight is, it's usually the last thing that will go down in the firehouse, so this isn't something that needs to be jumped on right away. But we usually look at the budget of where we are, and this is in our opinion, based on what we've seen previously, it'll be a long-lasting item for your floor. It'll be less wear and tear on the floor, and obviously, with the way the fire department and police department handle their vehicles, as long as everyone's not playing around on the inside, it should be standing up no problem. But I know how guys like to put the fire trucks and police cars, but we've seen it where it's held up incredibly long for the duration of the concrete floor. And like Jeff said, some of the issues do come up, that the floors have cracked before, and it's just an issue of maintaining that properly. But for the most part, it provides additional coverage for the wear and tear that would come normally on a concrete sealed floor. But with the apparatus being the size that they are, the uses, this is an extra layer of protection that will last the floor a lot longer than if we don't put it down. That was our intent of bringing it up to the chiefs after the fact. We saw that there was some money left in the budget, and we had gone to the chief and said, would you like to entertain the idea of probably epoxy flooring? Not trying to spend money, but trying to make the lasting of the floor even longer. And that was the whole intent. And we've done it, like Jeff said, many different ways, so,
So this will increase the durability of the floor?
yes.
So just a few items to point out based on just the conversation we had on deciding whether to bring this forward now, is I believe this includes some money for the police
Yes.
Sallyport as well.
Sallyport.
So you spoke a lot about big, heavy fire apparatus.
Yep.
I'm not thinking the same with a Ford Explorer, so help us with just police versus fire.
The reason, because this also will go into support spaces of the firehouse, but the main thing is bloodborne pathogens, blood from the cruiser coming in with a potential suspect who could be bloodied up from whatever, getting on the floor. They're easy to clean. You don't have to worry about situations like that. Again, we're not doing radiant floor heating, so you're not worried about, over time, all the snow and the ice coming down, heating the floor, but this will protect the floor from any type of potential oil, chemical from the trucks. And unfortunately, no matter how new the trucks are, they have a tendency to leak as well. So, but with the Sallyport, it was more geared towards a line of potential bloodborne pathogens and other chemicals getting onto the floor.
All right, you took my second part with the
Sorry.
oil and grease, et cetera. So, just for our benefit, oil and grease on the floor as we've currently procured it? Like, just, what's the
We have
difference
a
between
hardener
the?
sealer
Yep.
that'll be put down on the floor, so it'll prevent, it'll prevent it from seeping into the concrete. It won't necessarily prevent it from staining the surface, but it won't seep into the concrete and degrade the concrete itself.
What about, like road salt?
Hang on.
Sorry.
Just gonna go to Mr. Rooney. He's been very patiently waiting.
So, about 5 years ago, I, along with my 2 kids, we epoxied our garage, 3-car garage floor. And it was like a 5-day process, and it was an extremely expensive product. You had to put acid down first, and I can tell you, in terms of the appearance, it's like night and day. In terms of its durability, it does abrade, and the abrasions become more apparent as you drive over certain areas and you turn your wheel, even though you tell various people in your family not to turn the wheel, they do turn the wheel. I also found that if stains, oil and grease aren't wiped up quickly, it will stain.
Yeah.
But in terms of appearance and keeping it clean, it's night and day between a concrete floor. Now, I don't know if it's similar. It's an epoxy, it's got some specs in it, and it was a very expensive product. I assume it's somewhat similar.
This probably is a couple of levels above where the product you were using, because it's got cementitious product as part of some base layers, and it's got a vapor barrier at the bottom, and at its base level, epoxies are pretty similar, but this is intended for heavy-duty truck traffic.
My question is the useful life of this epoxy floor. I assume it's not going to be installed with an expectation that that's going to be the same finishing 10, 15 years from now. It's going to have to be redone at some point. Is there a useful life for this particular epoxy application that you're aware of?
I've seen epoxies down on floors that have been there for 30, 40 years. And that's not to say they look perfect.
Right.
But they're still there and they're doing a good job.
Yep.
I've also seen epoxies that the installation didn't go
Right.
quite right, and they had to get repaired or fixed several years into their useful life. So has a lot to do with the installation, but if it goes smoothly, it could last for quite a long time.
Okay, and the alternative is just a sealed concrete,
So-
which sealant has got to be replaced on a somewhat regular basis.
So it'll be a
correct?
penetrating hardener sealant type of product, so it'll harden the surface of the concrete as well as seal it. And yes, it should be done in the future, but it's still, that product will last quite a while. The main intent is to sort of keep anything from getting into the concrete and densify the very top layer of the concrete.
And my last question, if you could give me a percentage of the fire stations you've built in the last 5 to 10 years, and the police stations, and those that you are currently working on, what percentage would you say go with epoxy versus just the regular, to the extent it's called regular sealed concrete?
From what I would say, if you asked me that question 5 or 6 years ago, I'd say it's less than 25% do epoxy flooring. Now it's getting to close to 100%. Everybody's doing it.
Based upon function as opposed to appearance?
Based upon, because they look at it from a functional perspective, it's got a little bit more aggregate, the flakes you mentioned, but we'll have like a sand broadcast in there, so it's a little bit grippier floor, so it prevents slipping to some degree, more than a hardened concrete floor. It's a little bit more cleanable, and of course, it's brighter than
Right.
concrete.
Right.
And to most fire departments, particularly fire departments, that happens to be the most important space in their building, so they feel like they want to spend the money there. On the police side, much less. We usually put epoxies every single project we do in the detention area, but whether or not we do the Sally Port is always a question. And I'd say it's half and half, in terms of what times we've done the Sally Port. It's less of an issue of heavy equipment rolling in there, and because we have a drive-through, there is really unlikely to be people turning their tires on it. But, but the slip resistance is a question in
Right.
the Sally Port, particularly when you're dealing with people that may not want to be there.
And the concrete is not going to have an abrasive nature to it?
No,
Okay.
it would be whatever finish the concrete is. So the
Yeah.
finish would be smoothed. It wouldn't have a
Yeah.
tooth to it.
Because the epoxy does reduce the slipperiness substantially. Thank you, Jason, that's all I have.
All right, Mr. Barry.
Just kind of on the same lines of that, so salt seems to kind of deteriorate the concrete, correct? I mean, is that, so this is gonna definitely prolong that. How about, I know that on the trucks that I work on, we use chains, so we kind of grind it up, but all of our newer stations do have the epoxy, and everyone, it is a much better product than just having the actual cement. How easy is it to repair? I guess my question would be to make repairs to those areas. I mean, even with the areas that get damaged from the tire tracks, it's still a great product.
We've seen good success with people that know what they're doing. You get the actual installers that put the product down, or people that are highly qualified to do the repairs. But when they've done them, they usually turn out good. Now, they look like patches.
Yeah.
So you can tell that a repair was made, but, usually when the floor gets put down and it's a good floor, you're not gonna have problems happening for quite a while. There was a floor that we put down in one where they drove the engine in every place, the engine went to the same spot every time, and if there's one equipment bay in the truck that, I don't know, the same guy drops the wrench out of it every single time, and there has been a few little tiny spots where the epoxy has started to get damaged, but that's after a couple of years of using the building.
And we have one going on right now where the installer just did not properly prepare the turn-up of the floor going up, and it is peeling away, and he's repairing the entire thing. So, I mean,
That's kind of my, that leads me to the next question, which is, so if we table this and then, say, 3 years from now, we want to come back and revisit this and then epoxy the floors, as it is now, it's $90,000, and that's with a markup, so we're looking at probably $80,000 if we did it not through this. Would we be saving money if we?
Not saving money,
Not
definitely
saving
not saving money. And in 3 years, is just the natural course of construction inflation might actually boost that up significantly. But the other thing you should keep in mind is it's usually at least a week to do it. So all the trucks are gonna be outside during that time frame.
And then wear and tear on the floor, it's better to do this while it's new, because once the oil's been seeped into the concrete and they've been torn up a little bit through trucks driving over them.
So, like you mentioned earlier, you had to put the acid down, but the the contractors install this will actually, what's called scarify the floor. They'll actually beat it up and abrade it, so it's rough. So they will actually get rid of all of those oils. That's why they do it. They want to get rid of anything in there that might be an impurity that would prevent the bond. And even if it's a brand-new floor, they're still going to do that, which is why I said the biggest difference between whether we tell the contractor today or we tell them 3 months from now is that they won't, what's called burn the floor. They won't sort of trowel the floor smooth because they know it's just going to get abraded away by the guy doing the epoxy work. So why spend the extra effort to trowel it smooth? So they'll leave it with a sort of honed finish on there. If we tell them, nope, it's going to be a hardened concrete slab and they burn it, that still isn't a problem because later on they'll just come in and scarify that floor off. So whether we do it now or we do it later in the project, it's not going to affect the ability of them to install a good product. The question is, if you wait after the project is complete and do it later on, sometime down the road, then it's going to be added costs.
So, Mr. Wood, you were next.
Is there a warranty on this product? Like you said, that some of them, like, you've seen floors come up after like 5 or 6 years, so what's the standard warranty on the product?
That I have to find out
I
for
have to
you.
check the warranty.
Roughly.
I know you have
If you had to
you'd
guess.
have a 1-year installer's warranty, just typical from anything on the project. And then the product itself would be warranted against failure of the actual product. But it's the adhesion that you're really concerned about, so it'd really have to be in that first year, unless we ask for it.
And you
I'm
haven't
gonna
seen
look
that
for it.
type of breakdown in a year, you've seen it after a few years, you said,
No, it's usually, if there's a problem, you find it fast.
real quick.
Because they're driving heavy pieces of equipment, and they'll just pull, if there's an adhesion problem, they're gonna pull at that floor each time the tires start and grab, they're gonna pull at it.
So for the first year, we're gonna want the fire department driving all over the place in there.
Yeah, but
Yeah, driving it normally, definitely.
also, we shouldn't be left with the impression that it's gonna look the same way 3 years from
That's
the
right.
time of its installation, because it's just
Absolutely.
not going to.
That's absolutely true.
Marks and stains that are just not gonna come out with the epoxy in place.
And that's a good point, and everybody should have no expectation that this is gonna look brand new for years and years and
Right.
years. Day one, it's gonna start to get
Right.
a patina of use.
But it may help the floor last a lot longer.
Yes.
But I mean, the floor, I think the epoxy, as long as it's installed properly, should last a long time. You know, it'll be used, it'll be worn down, and eventually, some unknown amount of time in the future, it may have to get replaced. But like I said, the good floors that I've seen down have been down for 30 years. So it may end up becoming like more of an appearance thing, you know, boy, this part of the floor just really got worn from tires and dropping things, and eventually you're like, well, just looks crappy. We should fix it before it starts becoming, you know, completely worn through, and then there's no protection there at all.
Mr. Officer.
When I'm listening to this, I'm hearing you say it protects the floor. More so, first of all, than a concrete sealant. And what is it protecting the floor from? It's concrete.
Yeah.
Is it chunks of concrete coming out that we're concerned about, or what are we concerned about protecting? What conditions are we trying to protect from by installing the epoxy?
So the most time I've seen this product, most people have said the best uses for it are slip resistance, cleanability, and the potential for protecting against salts and oils. You know, chemicals that might damage the concrete if they get in contact with the concrete.
Do they provide more protection on that front than a concrete sealant?
Yes. It's a thicker, by the nature of the fact that it's just a thicker product and has a stronger material makeup, yes.
Okay.
So that's why if it starts to wear down and chips get into it, you know, you may want to fix those so that those aren't weak points in the system. Eventually that, you know, might be a weak point. Water could get into it, salts could get into it, oils could get into it.
And if salts and those kinds of things get into a sealed floor, what happens to the floor? I mean, what-
Over time,
Yeah.
you know, things will happen to it. And to be fair, we have done many hardened concrete floor fire stations. And, but you'll see them particularly where the trucks are driving through, tires are there. You know, you'll see them, where it's worn through, the concrete will start to pit. And eventually it'll develop micro cracks there, and the water and salts, soluble salts inside the water will seep into the concrete and start to
Dissolve the
crystallize
concrete, or,
no, they won't dissolve it, but they'll crystallize and they'll start to kind of break the concrete in little finer cracks, and more you drive on it, the more it's gonna continue to wear down. That may take a long time for it to happen, but it does, eventually it's gonna happen. And eventually you're gonna have to repair the floor. We've seen fire stations where more often this happens with suspended slabs above, space below, where the water has gotten into the slab. Slabs, usually what happens is the slab cracks. Water gets into that crack and gets to the rebar and then starts to erode the rebar or expand the steel, and that starts to break the slab up. But that's because the slab is flexing more. So with the slab on grade, it won't flex as much, but it'll still crack, and those cracks may expose rebar. And this epoxy system won't protect you from the crack, but the joint that I mentioned with the sealant in it will. And so that's why if you do see cracks occur, the epoxy may actually bridge a very, very fine hairline crack for a while, but if that crack moves or anything, you're gonna have to come back and saw cut it in and put sealant in it. So anytime we have a controlled joint where we expect or predict the concrete might crack, they have to prepare that a certain way with a sealant so that we can protect against the fact the water with salt could get in there.
Any other go ahead.
What we've currently paid for, you talked about them smoothing the floor.
Yep.
I would imagine there's a cost associated with that extra labor and effort, as well
Yeah,
as
Ellen and I
the
were
sealant.
talking about whether we could get a credit back from them
Correct.
if they didn't have to
Right.
burn the floor. I think that would be a hard conversation to have. What do you think, Kevin?
Be a
Well,
little
this
difficult,
one
we
is
don't mind
too.
trying, though.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to make a decision, obviously, today.
is it
to
the
go
same guy
forward-
that,
Go
is
forward
it
with
the
it,
same
and then we
company
could
that is gonna seal it, is the same company that's gonna put epoxy?
No, there'll be a specialty
Different.
contractor that will come in and do the epoxy flooring. The concrete contractor would probably put down the sealer hardener, and they would be the guys that would burn the floor, but, or trowel the floor. But the epoxy product would be a specialty contractor that would come back in. So, we could, if it was voted on and approved, we could go back to the contractor in the morning and see if they would entertain a credit on burning the floor, but I wouldn't get your hopes up.
But you're saying you would need a vote of yes to even entertain that conversation?
Well, we need to be able to tell the contractor that they should, when they put the slab down, don't burn the floor. We just don't want you to spend the labor for it, and we'd like to
But you
negotiate a
said the
credit for
burning
it.
happens later on regardless of what we do.
If it's already been done, they'd have to reburn.
They have to trowel the floor when it's placed. So as soon as they're placing the floor, then they're smoothing it and troweling it so that it's
And when are they
finished
placing the floor?
It's coming up soon. Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't think he had it in the,
Thought it was
3 week.
before the next meeting.
Just seems like there's a step that we paid for that we're not gonna have to do.
I understand.
And I think that we should recoup some of that money, especially if you were spending, more money.
Yep, I understand, but
Just a labor cost.
it's a labor
right?
cost,
Yeah, I mean,
and it's a
that's
question of
just-
whether that we can extract that from them,
right.
ultimately. Whether how much we wanna fight them
Yeah.
about it. Because it's only a small portion, even though it's a big floor.
It's a big floor, I would imagine it would
That
take
portion of their total labor for installing the concrete floor is only a small portion of the total cost of installing the floor. So,
and they're
I don't
looking
know
to
how
do that
much
the
it is.
25th.
of
When?
this,
January 25th.
January.
He's got the heaters on there right now, making sure the floor, the dirt and the soil is not frozen, so.
So we'd have to negotiate that now. I mean, we could agree tonight to do the epoxy, and then we could start negotiating any credit for this. This
But it sounds
labor,
to me like
but-
that potential credit really shouldn't drive this decision
No,
in any
because
respect.
they're
because
gonna
we don't
have
know
to
we're gonna
finish
get it.
the floor. I mean, they can't just leave it raw. They have to trowel it. They just won't trowel it to the same level. It's,
I mean,
we're
I've seen
talking
some of them
degree.
just polished, I mean,
Yeah, and we wouldn't have a polished floor anyways, because that would actually be detrimental to walking around on the apparatus floor. But, it's basically telling them, instead of burning the floor for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, do it for 5 minutes. And how much is that worth? I don't know.
just trying to save as much as we can, you know?
Ellen and I had the same conversation.
Okay.
All right, so any other questions? Mr. Rooney?
Both chiefs are in favor of the epoxy flooring. Jason?
Chiefs, I'll let you answer for yourself.
I don't think it matters on my end, so I'll defer. I don't have any experience with the product. I did want to ask, I took a self-appointed visit over to Uxbridge. And they
And Mike, chief.
I don't know if it matters much on my end, so I'll defer to fire, but I did take a self-appointed tour of Uxbridge, which you recently completed, so I don't know what the floor was made of, but you can perhaps tell us what their experience was?
Sure. Oxbridge got a different product than this product that we're recommending, and then they went to this product. The first product that was put down was not, we believe, was not put down correctly.
Was it an epoxy product?
It was an epoxy product, same manufacturer, but a different formulation. And we don't believe it was put down correctly. It was negotiated for many months with the contractor and eventually settled with the town, and they came back out and put a whole new flooring system down. And that solved all the issues the town had. So it has, it's a red floor there, I think, with yellow lines. I think it's yellow lines, and they have the control joints in it. If you go to Westford, which is another station, they just put it down, they opted not to put the control joints in. They did the epoxy seamless all over the whole floor. And with the caveat that if it does crack, they said they go back and have them cut the joint in wherever it cracks and add the sealant. But they like the look of not having the control joints visible, because even though the sealant's colored, it's not exactly the same color as the epoxy.
I have a photograph of it if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah.
This is Westford. We also did Littleton as well, but they're exactly the same.
Can we see it?
Sure, absolutely.
Put it on the screen.
I can't, it's on my phone,
No.
sorry.
No magic?
I don't have any, I don't have any.
It's a process to get it hooked up. So, Kevin, when we had discussed bringing this forward tonight,
Yep.
you had kind of said, we don't have to make a decision tonight. Sounds like only thing Jeff is saying is if we wanted to try to negotiate a credit, a decision is better tonight, but that's the only reason to drive a decision tonight.
Correct.
So I guess for the committee, I'm just looking to kind of get a temperature. People want to do more research, people want to think about it, people want to, are people not want this? Do people want it? They just want to do more homework? Like, where do you want to take this? Because, you know, I think there's been a lot of good questions. I think the consultants have been able to answer it. But we do not have to act on this tonight, which is kind of how I had opened this particular discussion. So I don't know if there's any general temperature of where people are leaning. Go ahead.
I can't see I don't see why we don't look to see and get a credit, even if we don't do it, at least. What harm is that?
We can ask. We're gonna see him in the morning, so.
It's, you know, maybe we could direct
Have
them
you ever been to one of those meetings?
Yeah, I've been to one, I've been to two of those meetings.
You want to cede your seat tomorrow?
I
Let
wasn't
pe-
uniform at the time, but,
I don't think that matters for these.
Well, if we don't know what we're doing,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not ready, I think I'd like to
we
look
need
at
to know
think
all
about
the
it.
answers, I think, and,
So I'm
So
not
Pete's
sure.
it sounds like, so just to paraphrase what Pete said, Pete is advocating that we try to get the credit tomorrow, but he's not, you're not
Right,
ready to
no.
take any action tonight.
correct.
Right,
Doesn't
but if
hurt
they-
to get
but
the
if-
credit.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, but if they're gonna put in the floor, they're gonna have to know what to do when they do it, right?
Well, but hang on, so
Right.
if all of a sudden they come back and they say, oh, it's a $15,000 credit, I can call a special meeting
Sure,
between now and the 25th for the committee to act on it, but if they
Sure.
come back with $500, I think you all,
it doesn't
I think
matter.
I can kinda, so I'm gonna say if they come back with something substantial, I'm not gonna,
Can we come up with some numbers? Like if
I
they
think
give us
that-
$5,000 off, are we ready to go forward?
I hate to argue in a public setting on a live TV feed, so I don't think we should be negotiating here, and throw a number out there. So I would just kind of defer, I would ask that you defer to town administrator and myself if there was decent
No,
credit that
just
comes back that
like-
will, I guess, but what I also want to hear is, even if there's a $50,000 credit, which we all know that there's not going to be, I'm going to
Right.
throw a big
I
number
don't
out
think
there.
it's gonna be
right, like-
anything much substantial anyway.
If a majority of this committee has no appetite in hearing about this again, it's a moot point. So I'm just trying to measure whether people want more time to think about it, whether people are dead set against it, or people are all for it no matter what happens with the credit. So it sounds like you want to hear the credit. David, where are you
I
at?
want to think about this.
I want to think about it. Brennan?
I think I want to think about it.
I
John?
don't need to think about it any further.
Do you want to share where you're at, or you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think if 100% of the stations are being built with it now, it's the recommendation of the architects, it's the recommendation of the fire chief, I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Kathy?
I'm also in favor of.
John?
I'm mostly in favor of it.
And I am too,
Okay.
But my cheap side saying, is there any, what did Westboro do on their floor? Didn't you do
We have a polished sealed floor,
the poly seal?
polished sealed, yeah.
Any towns around that didn't do the poly, that you know of?
Not that I know of.
Recent, really?
The only one that didn't do it was Chelmsford that I know of, up 495. Littleton did it, Westford did it, Marshfield did it, Randolph did it.
Prolongs the life of the floor. I mean, there seems to be more pros than cons to me.
Do we have the breakout between police and fire,
For which?
the epoxy flooring?
I don't know.
Like if we cut the square footage?
Right, I mean, that sounds to me like we'd probably be cutting out the Sally port, right? Because
Which
The epoxy's
is
gonna
not as
be-
big.
No, I totally
Zippers.
disagree with cutting out the Sally port. Now, I think that's where it'd be more important to me.
Well, no, I'm just
Equally
saying
as
that if we
important.
were going to be cut on the police side, it'd be cut out of the Sally port. That's the area that it would not be done, right?
That's, yeah, because I think they're saying the hallways
Because
and
hallways
cells have to be done.
have to be
Yeah.
done. Okay.
No, there's no breakout.
The square footage of the Sally port has got to be
Nothing compared to the
10% of
apparatus
the,
space, yeah.
space, so, okay.
Mhm.
So if we were to say, do the equipment bay but not the Sally port, we're not going to save that much money is our guess.
Oh, yeah, it's not gonna be, it's
Yeah,
gonna be,
I don't-
it's gonna be proportional and based on square footage, I'm sure.
I don't think it'd be that huge. Couple thousand.
That's apparatus.
All right, so,
Family.
I like it, I just want to pay for it.
It's 50,000 places.
all right, so
The apparatus for.
I'm hearing
Well, I'm just saying, like,
somewhat more time,
it's gonna be less than 1,000 places. If they're.
and I'm hearing some are all set and ready to move forward.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What's more time going to, what advantage does that give us?
I'll
It
speak
gives
to
us
the
a
people
chance
that-
to think about it, look at this, and consider this $90,000 cost.
Okay.
Look, if it were $40,000 or $20,000, I don't think it'd be that big a deal. This is a big chunk of money.
Makes sense.
And if there's no pressing reason to vote tonight, and I don't see any pressing reason, then if we wait till our next meeting, I think at least I can be a little more comfortable with whichever decision I make.
Mr. Wood?
Are there any other big change orders that you know of that are coming up, or any change orders that in tens of thousands, 20,000 range, 50,000 range, hopefully less?
We do have several items that aren't on the list that you see here, but some items that the owner has to procure and purchase. That was not part of the original.
If you had to guess, how much money would we be talking on those?
Well, hang on one second. Do you have the sheet for the next item or not? on our
I
agenda?
have the list of the 5 with costs for 4 of them.
All right, so I think it's an incredibly good question, and I wasn't gonna let the committee vote before having this, if we did go toward vote tonight. There are some items that we have to buy, but there's also some items we don't have to buy, which could be sizable. I just haven't heard the numbers yet, but they're hundreds of thousands potentially. I don't know where we landed, but
Hundreds of thousands up or down, which,
savings, but there's also
Okay.
things we have to buy. So what I wanna do is maybe if
then that's,
that's the only remaining question on epoxy. I'll let Kevin walk through kind of where he's at and everything else we have to buy in the project. And I think, Kevin, you have to touch on things that we know about for potential change orders, like the signs, to accurately answer John's question.
But before he does that, can we tee this up with a summary, and this may be Ellen that needs to do this. I always have trouble going from here to the GCO 702. So I'm just trying to understand where we are before we talk about what's to come. So we've approved change order 6 tonight, right? And that's about $65,000 if I added it up right. this includes change orders through what, 5?
5. So I'll try to answer this, because unless, Kevin, you want to, because this is a John Lemieux work product.
Okay,
This is-
because it's slightly different. So you got if you go to this page here, you've got 198 as far as the, I think, 5 approved change orders for the building,
Change order 4
Yeah.
right?
and
And then
CCDs.
you've got 200 here, but this includes golf course too.
Yeah.
The GC 702.
Right,
So
the
that's why
one
I'm having
she's
trouble
talking about,
reconciling this
7.
to this.
Payment
So
number
the
7
easiest
is
thing,
not
so the
included.
easiest thing to look at, go to page 1,
Okay. I did.
This is the DC.
and look at
It's not
the
included.
bottom of C, so C27 and C28,
Minor thing, but it doesn't include change order 5.
1.8 million and 1.5 million.
Yep.
That is the amount of money we have that has not been allocated to a certain item on this project yet. That's your
Right.
remaining
So then go to
contingency.
D, so that's the better number, right?
Yep.
That's what we have, so that's just the opposite of what you just said. So we think right now, we're gonna spend 18,661,000.
Well, so let me give an example of why I don't think that's the right column to use. Computer equipment and network, look in column C, we budget 150,000. Right now, we haven't bought any of that, so it's 0 in column D.
Okay,
We're
so
gonna buy some number of that. The good news is, I think on that is, it's not gonna be a lot. But that's why when I've looked at this, my view is I always look at 27 and 28, and I add those two numbers up, which is north of $3 million.
Yep.
Right? That's, my goal is to hopefully have any additional contingency spending that we have offset by maybe savings in some of the other categories up above. Like, for example, if we don't have to spend all the telephone money, right, that drops and helps us offset some other items that are just gonna come up from the natural course of business as we're finding,
Okay, so
right?
I'm with you, so if you do that, so take the 22.6, right, take out the 3.4
Mm-hmm,
between those two, right? So now
Yep.
we're at 19.2.
yep, that's
Okay.
the number I would use.
All right, so that's what we think we're gonna spend right now, right?
Yes.
And then we add the land on, it, which was 5, right? So we're over 24 now at that point. Okay, so we think, so column C, we think includes change orders 1 through 5?
I know it does, yes.
All right, so it doesn't include 6, though, and we approved 6, that's another 60
Yep,
that we did tonight, okay? All right, so with that as kind of our jumping off point, so what I'm trying to understand is then, what do we think net we're going to spend after we add 6 to column C?
After we add what to column
so
C?
you just
60,
added 6
we-
to column
The
C.
60.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
You
we
added
approved tonight, so I'm
60.
adding,
Yep.
change order 6 to it, so
Yep.
that's 60, it's almost
Yep.
65, right? So that's what so that's our current budget right now, because we approved that tonight,
Right.
right? The epoxy's not in there, the epoxy floor's not in there.
Right.
Okay, so, if we assume we're gonna approve the epoxy floors, let's do the worst case, right? Then, based on what you just said, as far as we've got some big debits and we've got some big credits coming, right?
Mhm.
If you had to guess, how does that all net at this point?
That's what I'm gonna turn the floor over to Kevin on, because this is gonna be news to me too. I just know he's been working very feverishly on it, and it's an important part of the decision we're gonna make on the epoxy, in my opinion.
So, thank you. So what we have, we were tasked last meeting to go off and find several items that we just didn't have an exact number to. There might have been a line placeholder for it, but we just didn't have the exact number. One of those was telephones. We actually got the quote back in from Mr. LaFlame today, and that cost additional to what they're bringing over from the existing both stations is $48,000 that we have not accounted for a real number to, and now we have that real number, and now we'll import it into the budget.
How much? 44?
$48,000. Yep. We
And you
had
have a
gone,
budget for 50 for that.
right. So we're at 48, so we're 2 under. Also, you had a budget for $150,000 for computers and networks. That's the one that's still up in the air, talking to Tom, because we need to have a meeting with both chiefs to go over how many printers and copiers that they need. We have a good guesstimate of how much each one costs. I just need to sit down, because I know the chief, police chief, they just got a brand-new copier. It's leased, I believe it is. So we're gonna be bringing that over. The question now becomes, do you need a second one? And we talked it over with the fire department chief. Again, he needs one, plus there's gonna be several printers that have to go along with it. Those prices are not astronomical, but until I have the exact number of each one, which I'm hoping to get this week from both of them. We'll be able to forward you an exact cost for that.
And you're working with a $150,000
Yes,
budget?
within that
Okay.
budget. Yep.
But are you thinking way less than 150?
I'm
On
thinking
par
your
with
a-
150?
Your average color copier is about $8,000. A good one, a real top of the line. So I'm going top of the line, and then it'll just fall in underneath that. And a printer is about $1,500. So
What kind of printers do you buy?
that's the one Tom LaFlame gave me the numbers for.
Cheekers. That's not a Staples price,
He's
right?
right, the
No, it's not
copier, I
staples.
just got it, so the copier is 8 to 10,
Yeah.
really good, scanner does everything, so I agree with him, but there is no reason to pay $1,500 for it.
Again, that 1,500 is top of the line. We're not getting top of the line, but I'm giving you an order of, okay, this is what it could potentially cost.
Why
But
do we
until I
need
sit
top of
down-
the line printers?
We don't, I needed a number to go with. And I don't want to go with a number that's $600 when they're all going to be $800. So I'd rather go high and then bring us back down to reality. I don't want to come back and tell you I made a mistake and, oh, by the way, it's $5,000 more.
All right, so go with your top of the line for a second, right? Like,
Be conservative.
like,
Okay.
are we talking where you think, do you have any idea on the needs of the departments yet? Or like, do you know that you have X printers now and you might add one more? Like, are we at 100,000 or are we at 150? Like, that's what I'm just trying to gauge. Like, is there a credit coming in this line item or not? Based on what you know today?
I would not want to tell you that tonight until I speak to the chiefs. But I could get that to you by the end of the week. I'll
Okay.
let you know for that.
Okay.
Computer equipment, right?
So,
And-
so I don't want to belabor the point here, but you guys had 7 weeks to figure this out.
What happened was, I was under the impression from talking with Tom that this was all covered, and then we had another subsequent conversation last week, and we didn't include copiers and printers. I thought it was covered, I apologize, it's my fault.
Okay, keep going,
Strictly
sorry.
just mine. Then on top of that, kitchen appliances, that's part of the contract, and then dispatch desks. We went back to the quote that we got from Evans, who will be providing the dispatch desks. We spoke it over with the chiefs. The original estimate was $98,000. We got a quote from him for $56,000 to do 2 desks, and a third one to be piped in, but not the third console. Right now, in speaking with the chiefs, we definitely need 2. We don't need the third one right now, but the cost of a third one would be an additional $21,000. But we should put in the infrastructure for it and just provide a regular desk that could eventually be turned over to another work console if we need it.
And what was the price for that?
$21,000.
No, for the two, until you got.
Oh, for the 2, $56,000.
And just for everyone's benefit, we have 68,500 remaining in that line item. So if you went with the 2 desks, you're well within the budget with some savings. If you went with 3, you're way over. That's really the.
Right.
So if you went to a 2 dispatch console setup, which I'm in favor of, because don't see a need for a third unless we went to regional dispatch, which
I agree with you.
another town can pay for that if they come into, what is the savings on dispatch equipment? Like, was there a third console procured as part of the radio system already?
I would have to check that out, that I don't know,
All right, because that would be sizable too, I would assume.
I would assume.
If we're buying 3 consoles, we're now only buying 2 consoles.
So the original quote from Evans was for $96,000, I believe, for all 3. And then now we're.
Evans is the furniture,
Evans is, he also does the monitors and everything else along with it.
but I'm asking about the actual, what they push the button to.
I'll have to find that out from Motorola and everybody else.
Okay, Chief, do you remember off the top of your head whether there's 3 or 2 you were planning to bring one? Okay. So there really is no need to furnish a third, essentially, just have it set up for the future
In
if
case
there
you
was ever
needed it
needed
ever.
it. Okay. All right, so it sounds like you have no, oh, you do have some additional items, right, to keep, you're not done with your list, are you?
These are the ones that we were tasked to do. The other ones were, and Ellen will be able to answer this one with regards to the signs out in the street.
And the gear
I
lockers
believe
that are
the
missing?
gear lockers is $34,000. That's something that we have to procure as well. And then the signs,
Change order.
Thought you started over 100 and I almost had a heart attack, but yeah, I think we're
7?
down to 7.
And we budgeted for 60?
No, we had originally, we didn't have it.
This is an added cost.
Oh,
So the, right now, the change order we're looking at, it's in negotiation still, and we're not sure it's 100% yet, but it's around 7,000 for the cost of the signs, the additional components that are needed.
So, plural?
There's 2 signs.
North, south, right?
We have a design set for the signs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Planning told us.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
these are,
So, just so it wasn't lost, so we talked about signs, but Kevin, you also mentioned the gear lockers.
Yes.
So the gear lockers for the firefighters were not included in the bid. So right now, they have no lockers to put their gear in. So the good news is it's a state bid list item. So my understanding is we don't have to procure it through the general contractor, i.e. there is no upcharge, and we're getting it for the same price as if we were just putting them in the current station. That's a 34 and change item that we need to consider.
Yes,
3,400?
34,000.
34,000, yeah, it's kind of,
34,000.
They're expensive.
The only thing that's not included in that $34,000 is the actual installation of the lockers, which, according to the chiefs, they want bolted to the floor and to the walls. So we'd have to go, and we're waiting for Gear Grid to get back to us. Do you do this? I'm believing the answer is gonna be no.
and that would be a change order to the contractor,
Right.
unless the town
It's
had
somebody to-
extra people laying around that wanted to assemble these. They really do come like an IKEA thing in a million pieces,
Mhm.
and somebody has to put them all together.
Chief, I guess, what have you seen other departments that have installed these, post-construction in the past? I mean, I know departments put them in old stations still. Do you have any insight into how other departments have dealt with that, the installation piece?
Departments we've worked with that have procured them on their own, because that does happen from time to time, have done it, the firefighters have done it. They put them together. Typically, those are the ones on wheels, though, not the ones that are bolted to the walls, so.
Okay. Mr. Rooney?
Question, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't. I know there are gear lockers now. Are those not transportable over?
They are not in the sense that they're on casters and rollers, and we don't.
Those are on rollers now? Okay.
So, rough math, I think we're talking about, we have some additions, gear lockers, and the signs, as the known change orders, right? We have some potential credits coming if we don't buy top-of-the-line printers in computer equipment and network, and we're roughly on budget in everything else,
did you
or
say,
slight savings.
you started talking about kitchen and appliances. Was there net savings, net cost on that?
So it was included.
It's
So
included
this-
in the
Oh, it was.
contractors.
Okay.
So I think the way I would summarize it is, there's no big items known that have not been brought in front of us. There's also not probably a huge savings out there in any one of these items. They're probably gonna roughly wash each other out within ten to $20,000, it sounds like.
That's the anticipation, yes.
So I mean, not to harp on this, but on the $150,000 for the computer equipment and network, my personal view is we need to make sure the right people are weighing in, which I've asked the Municipal Technology Committee to weigh in, because I don't know anything about this stuff, right? But I would also say we are moving away from a paper world. So printers, while are necessary for certain things, and there are certain things that they still have to keep in hard copy, I don't think we need them in every console and every desk throughout a station. So I would just ask that as you work through this, you be strategic and vet, locations, and less may be better here. Like, maybe you buy a nicer printer, but less of them, if you think that will last longer. That's,
We're nitpicking, but I am going to nitpick on this one. So a really nice, top-of-the-line machine that can print, scan, and copy, which you want all three. I mean, a really nice one that holds up great, is $8,000 to $10,000. So there's your big printer right there. And then, I don't know why you don't need but a couple more small things. I've got an office of 15 people, we do use our paper, that is plenty for us. It don't hurt to get up and go to the big printer, I mean, that's what you're gonna have to do, but there, I just can't imagine you need more than that for a police fire station. I mean, I don't know what you're printing, that goes all day long. So I hope that they're very conservative with that, and we can see that you get what you need and no more.
Yeah.
But
Why
the big
can't,
one will do all three.
why can't you lease as opposed to purchase?
Oh,
They
you can.
should, they should.
You can.
You are gonna lease then?
I'm not doing anything. You can do that.
Why wouldn't we lease
They
as
should,
opposed
they
to
should.
purchase?
But- I'm sorry, go ahead.
They should lease, so you can either do a one-payment lease, which is what I'm talking about,
Right.
or you spread it over, and it takes care of all your supplies, your toners,
Right.
everything, which is what costs so much with printers.
Maintenance.
Yep, it takes care of everything, it's all built in.
And we'll get that number from Tom because they're doing it now with the police department.
Okay.
So he'll have the baseline of what that's gonna cost, and then we could just incorporate that into the exact actual number, so we'll be able to put that into the budget. But if the leasing's the way to go, I'm sorry, I don't make that decision. It's up to the gentleman over there or the town. I can only give you what I'm told.
Okay, so let's assume all that nets out to zero, right?
Mhm.
Okay, it sounds like we're being conservative even saying that, right?
Mhm.
So we've got our column C,
Mhm.
that's the two last numbers, right?
Mhm.
For the contingency and the bid savings. We add to that change order 6, which we approved tonight, which is about 65.
Yep.
Add the epoxy in to be conservative, 'cause it looks like,
Is 90.
right? And then that might be it.
Might be.
It's a good estimate.
Yeah, that's,
That's
I
what
mean,
I'm
I didn't, like, for example, not to throw salt in the wound, like, I didn't expect the showers to be missing, but like, there's probably some more of that. I assume you're not gonna sit here and guarantee us that there's nothing else like that we're gonna have no choice but to buy, like
Yeah.
the station alerting, that,
I think I've been on record throughout the project saying that we're gonna make some mistakes, and we'll be upfront about it, but the big unforeseen things are starting to fall away, and I'd say we're getting more into the design and engineering and making sure it's actually, A, what the department wants, what the town expects, and what we expect as part of our design. So, making sure all the parts fit together correctly and everything's been captured. That's the next stage. I think there is some, and we'll talk about schedule in a bit, but there's also some components of that need to get rationalized as we start to get closer. And of course, they're just putting studs up, so it's so hard to talk about the end of the project. But as we get closer to the end of the project, sometimes contractors start getting fast and furious, and that's where things can start going down the wrong road. So we also want to make sure that we're on top of, both Vertex and us are on top of the contractor, making sure that they're properly planning the work, so we don't run into a situation where they box themselves into a change order that could have been prevented. For instance, it might be an issue with the drawing, but if they had told us 3 weeks early, we would have been able to catch it, not spend the money, do something different, but they didn't catch it. They ask us the day before they need to go out and hammer it in, and now we have no option. Now we've just got to pay the money because they didn't
I
catch it.
appreciate
so.
that, but it certainly heightens the opacity of your crystal ball by you telling us that. I don't know if we have any larger change orders coming in the future, is what you're saying.
I think we'd be naive to.
I would love to be able to say I knew,
Right.
but I do not know of anything that is large that's lurking out there.
Like a missing
That's-
stairs or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, all the components that I would have expected
for them.
are there, but I can't say that we've got 100% of it.
Understood. And
That's
I don't
part of
think
the-
we're asking that.
Part of the challenge, yeah.
Trying to expect, my whatever moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's one that we've been negotiating for 3 months, it seems like, for these silly antenna racks on the roof. And it's gonna be a cost. It's gonna be a small amount of money, but it's gonna be a cost because they just won't let it go. And I think another contractor would have just built the thing, and gotten it done, but it's, but it's things like the shower thing. We've been negotiating that with them for a couple of months too, so, it's been out there and we've kind of tried to get ahead of it, but I don't have any of those in my back pocket right now.
Chief, did you have something to say?
I just don't know if we cleared up, we were talking about the copiers, and then you talk about leasing versus buying outright, but in my mind, leasing would be a budget item that's recurring, and I don't know if we could take the money, out of the project, and then you'd also have, even if you talk about buying them outright, you have to incorporate some maintenance, agreement going forward, so that's my
I
only
mean,
thought.
any cost we're paying for here is over 30 years, no matter what size of the cost that's in this budget. Okay, so I think everyone has a general sense of where we're at, right? Like, we could continue to discuss what bolts are missing most of the night. So I'm not here, so while I think some members are in favor of moving this tonight, I'm also hearing some members that want some time to think about it. And I'm not hearing anything from our project team that says we have to approve this tonight. So what I'd like to do with the committee's permission is accept Mr. Goodney's suggestion for them to try to say, hey, the committee's seriously exploring the epoxy, what would the credit be? Then number two, if they come back with a credit and we need to act on it before the concrete goes in, I'll call a special meeting so that we can deliberate and either approve or reject that change order. And if not, then let's just say they come back, no credit, they've done everything they can, then I'll have it on the agenda for next meeting. That way no one feels rushed into a decision, and you'll be that much further into the construction to know what, if anything else popped over the course of a month. Does anyone have any, go ahead.
Just one more question
Mike?
on the credit. Isn't all sound on? One more question on the credit. I know you got the process of, roughing up the surface, not polishing it, but also the sealer itself, is that a different vendor, like the painting contractor?
The concrete contractor owns the hardener sealer.
The
as
hardener
part of
sealer,
his
and
scope.
that is not to be used with
That-
epoxy, I
They wouldn't
take it.
need to use it if we put the
So we're
epoxy
gonna
on.
get that credit as well?
That's part of the conversation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, now, that also goes over most of the slab, or all the exposed areas of the slab, so it's not just the areas we'd be putting the
That's not
epoxy.
just labor,
We're
that's-
still gonna have a few slabs that are just regular old concrete with hardener sealer on it, so it's not like you take the whole line item off the top.
Right.
There's a chunk of that that's still.
But that's labor and materials as well,
Labor and
'cause that is a
materials,
material.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to install it.
I'm just wondering, is there anywhere in the documents that we have that the specific product is called out,
Do you wanna know the name?
identified?
If I can pull it up
I
real
can send
quick,
you
I
the
can tell
complete
you.
change order after the meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
So what you know is when they get a change order, it's 20 to 25 pages of each one. I obviously do not send every little.
Thank you.
So I'll send that one to answer the question, as long as everyone's okay with the path I've proposed and moving forward on this. And I guess if anyone individually thinks of questions that they want answered to ensure, they know how to vote next time, just reach out to Jeff or Ellen or Kevin in the meantime to get whatever questions you have answered.
Terrific.
Everyone good on that one? All right, so we're gonna pass on any motions on epoxy flooring. I'm also going to pass on number 6, review and approval of items requiring procurement, because it doesn't sound like you need anything from us tonight, Kevin?
No.
And none of that pricing's gonna change in like
No.
the, okay. So I'll move right into invoices for approval. So the first one is a Vertex, so we have 2 invoices for Vertex, one for November and one for December. Does anyone have any objection to bundling these together in one motion? Kevin, I had one question for you, and I don't know if you're in a position to answer it. It looks like you were clerk of the work some days when Bill was out.
Yes,
So we pay your rate even though you were the clerk?
yes.
Okay, that's not what John told us, just so you know.
What did John tell you?
We
You were
pay
free.
clerk rate. If John was out there clerking, we pay the clerk rate.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's what you told
So-
you, then I'll adjust it.
I don't know how the committee wants to deal with that, but it was, what, a couple days, Kevin?
If you leave it as it is right now, I can adjust it for next month. I'll just take time away from when I was here. That's all. Instead of having to
I'm
go all
not
the way back
suggesting,
and redoing it.
I'm
no.
I'm more on the messaging more
I'm
than
just trying
the
to be fair. That's
actual
all. I'm not looking at.
dollars it's gonna save us.
See that money anyways.
I don't know if the committee has a view on that.
Yeah.
One way or another.
That's good, yeah.
All right,
That's fair.
all right.
Jason, the only question I have is that I
I
appreciate
was.
the detailed invoices, but there's some items where it appears that you're just exclusively dealing with golf course issues.
Yes.
Is that part of our wallet as well?
We own all OPM for the entire
Okay.
project. We just never went and bifurcated that.
Understood.
The good news is they seem like they're very much on budget, so it's not like that's causing an overage. We probably would be a lot less without the golf, but it is what it is. It was a package deal. So I guess I will move that we accept the Vertex invoices as presented for November and December and request a future credit for the project manager when working in a clerk position. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. We'll move on to other vendor invoices, one for UTS and two for Context. This is just 2 months because of the timing of our meetings. Anyone want to hold any of these? Anyone have any questions on these?
I have one question,
Go.
and I'm sorry. I'm looking at a UTS invoice, and I just happened to notice that all file test reports are discarded 6 months after completion of services. I know this is kind of an odd question to come out of the
We get the
blue.
reports.
So you have them?
We get all the reports, yes. The building inspector gets them, we get them, Kevin gets them. They're in the project record.
Thank you. That's all.
Any questions on that? Then I will move that we accept those 3 invoices as presented in Vertex's recommendation letter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. We'll move on to CTA's requisition number 7 for the month. So remember, we follow the cover letter, which this month will be $776,668.67 for the public safety portion of the project, less retainage. Are there any questions for Kevin or Jeff on what's being passed through this month?
So Jason, the January 10th letter is not the correct?
Nope, that is the correct letter. You're just looking at the first number, top right, the 776. Because the green goes to CPC, and everything underneath that, Mark has to deal with from the
Got it.
golf funding.
Got it. Thank you.
But it's one check that ends up getting cut by the town, and then there's a
Understood.
journal entry behind it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? I'll move we accept requisition for public safety as presented in the Vertex letter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so that carries unanimously. We move on to project budget update, which is the big 11 by 17 piece of paper in front of you. I'm not aware of any differences between this and the version that was circulated in the packet. What I will say, and I wanted the committee to buy in on this, is I had a discussion about the presentation of the canopy. We had, at the outset, decided that bid savings are bid savings, but I thought it was appropriate to reclassify from the project contingency to the bid savings line, the canopies, because if we had procured the canopies on day one, our bid savings would have been that much lower. You could then choose to split it even further in terms of what it was originally and what it became. We agreed to present it this way in terms of the total cost of the canopies is actually reducing our bid savings. And then project contingency, that's like the showers, the cornices, et cetera. Does anyone have any objections to that presentation? Just, it went against what we had originally decided, but I thought that was probably the only item that will fit in that particular category down the road. Any other questions on what was provided on that? All right, so, Jeff, you said you had something on scheduling?
Well, I thought we would get into the schedule. I don't see it on the agenda, but that was maybe.
I view scheduling as part of the owner's project management monthly update, so if there's something on scheduling we need to be aware of, I think.
Not unless you have anything.
No, not right now.
No, I think my comment was mostly about, I thought we were gonna talk about the schedule later, so I was saying that if we look at the end of the project and the tasks that fall at the end of the project, it sometimes gets congested with the amount of work that's happening, finishes getting completed, things like that. And so, to the comment I made earlier about having to stay on the contractor to make sure they're still planning the work accurately, that's where it gets a little bit trickier, to avoid some change orders. But I didn't have a comment specifically about the schedule.
So you have no concerns on the project schedule as it currently exists?
Nope, as it currently exists, we're still working on it with the contractor. We have the current draft schedule, and we met with him last week, meet again this week, so.
So in terms of meeting schedule, our next meeting is scheduled for the second Monday of February, which is February 11th. If you recall the discussion we had last time, we had booked this room, and then planning board had not booked their hearings for the year, and they have a strong desire to use this room due to the live TV feed and the need to record. The 11th is one of their planned hearing dates. They had originally agreed to go to 7:30 PM so that we could meet from 6 to 7:30, and, you know, give or take, you know, this, I think, was a longer meeting. I think they're gonna be a little shorter going forward, right? We probably could get most of our business done in an hour and a half and still use this room to make it easier on the folks from SAM. They've now informed me that on the 11th, they have to start at 7 because of some public hearing. I don't really feel like cutting a conversation short. I didn't clearly envision some of the conversation even tonight. I expected the epoxy, I didn't expect some of the others. So my recommendation would be, is, you know, pending the fire chief's approval, we do, as long as they don't have training that night, do the meeting at the fire department for that specific evening and start at a normal 6:30, as opposed to trying to start at 6, having someone be late, and then having people trying to kick us out of the room. I just don't think leads to a productive meeting, given that we're doing this once a month. So 6:30, fire department next month, pending confirmation that the room's available.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other business? Any public comment? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. There a second?
Second?
All in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.